Hey everybody, welcome to Rackspace, the #1 managed cloud company. We're broadcasting live today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some of our dedicated servers and how we can deploy them rapidly into a cloud-centric world. My name's Alan Bush. I'm the host of Office Hours Hangouts, and I've got a couple of special guests with me. I've got Doug and Chris joining me. Doug is a host of his own live stream show that happens every Wednesday called Deep Dive, and they really focus on the dedicated world. So it was definitely a great choice to have you joining us here today to talk a little bit more about that. And then we've got Chris joining us as well, who lives in that world as well. Gonna get to know them here in just a second, but I just want to say hi to everybody that's watching on Facebook, on Periscope, and on YouTube. Thanks. We appreciate all the live viewers. If you're watching, we'd love to hear from you too. So let us know what's going on, what's on your mind, and we'd love to answer some questions for you. If you want to follow along on Twitter as well, you can just drop us a comment with the hashtag CloudQA, and we'll pick up on those too. So really looking forward to hearing all of your questions and comments. So let's go ahead and jump into this. And Doug, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and especially the deep dives that you do.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. The deep dive is actually inspired by this show, so it's great to actually participate in it and see how we can improve our game. But I am the Director of Technical Marketing for our dedicated infrastructure business unit here at Rackspace. So all things single tenant, basically from storage to compute and networking. I do things that help support our product marketing activities, things such as the deep dive where we really unpack a lot of what fanatical support means in real human terms.
With real humans.
With real humans, right? And then I also have a side gig where I'm also the product marketing manager for our managed databases and DBA services product lines. So I kind of juggle those two worlds today.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when we came to you and said, hey, would you be willing to jump in? Our normal co-host Drew Cox is on a family vacation. Hey, Drew, I hope you're having a great vacation. You immediately said, let's get Chris to join us as well. So,
I did.
So Chris, we're happy that you were able to join us. We really appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been a Racker?
I've been a Racker. I actually just celebrated my 3rd year here.
Congratulations.
On May 20th last week.
Congratulations, yeah.
Been a great joyride.
It has. It usually is. So what type of things do you do here at Rackspace?
I am a product manager for our dedicated portfolio.
Okay.
So I deal with a lot of the dedicated gear that we're provisioning for our customers.
Right.
And I'm responsible, one of the items I'm responsible for is rapid provisioning, what we call rapid deployment, ensuring that customers can have that dedicated gear as quickly as possible. Because fast, and they have needs that need to be met in a timely manner. Plus, we just want to delight our customers because it's what we do.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's absolutely what we do. And the rapid deployment stuff is one of the things I really want to jump in and talk about. We live in this cloud world where we can get a server provisioned in 2 or 3 minutes, right? We can get hundreds of servers provisioned in just a couple of minutes, and that's great for a lot of use cases. But then there are plenty of use cases where people still want and need that dedicated server, that single tenant, either for PCI compliance or just performance reasons, right? So having the ability to run one of those, right? That's something that used to take, at least a person walking into the data center, rack mounting a server and getting it, online, and getting it up and running and connected. But now we're able to do that in minutes, right? I mean, tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
One of the great things with rapid deployment, it allows us to take the cloud scenarios that a customer has today and put it behind a dedicated firewall because of their compliance needs, as you referred to before. Many of them want to make sure that they're going through specific routing through that firewall. And with rapid deployment, we can do a firewall, put those cloud accounts behind a firewall in hours. So it actually makes it really nice for customers today. And we can ensure then that we have specific VPN access to those firewalls as well to ensure that they're only getting the traffic they want to those cloud servers.
Yeah.
We also too can, with rapid deployment, we can also enable database, a rapid deployed database behind that firewall as well, ensuring that customer they can route that traffic to that DB and write to that DB from those cloud accounts behind that firewall. We can do that quickly, and we can do that within 1 business day and connect all those pieces together. But that rapid deployed gear can be up in hours.
No, that's great. That's great. All right, so we've talked about a couple of the, kind of giving a real quick overview. Just want to say again another welcome to everybody that's watching us live on Facebook and Periscope and YouTube. Great to have you along for the ride. Feel free to jump in with any questions you might have on this. If it's something that you've been looking at or want to know kind of a little bit more about, we'd be happy to answer them for you. But let's talk about some of these different scenarios. And I think the first one that we want to talk about is the compliance issues, right? So I mean that's one of the things we see a lot. Doug, can you tell us a little bit about some of the different types of compliance? There's PCI, HIPAA, things like that.
I mean the list is long and distinguished. But yeah, PCI is probably one of the most.
That's probably the most common one we see.
That we see here at Rackspace. There are certain controls outlined by things like HIPAA that we have customers that approach us and want help with. And if you can look beyond the world of multi-tenant cloud, the toolkit that we have at Rackspace to help customers meet those needs grows significantly. Because a lot of those guidelines, many of those guidelines have statements that involve things like single tenancy that focus on things like data privacy issues, right? And single tenancy is one effective way of helping meet those such controls. And again, that's why in my series we talk so much about hybrid architectures. We spend a lot of time talking about customers that had use cases where,
right.
If you looked at the workload as a whole, it wasn't an easy decision just to go all cloud or all dedicated. Subcomponents of the workload had attributes that were right for one or the other, right? So being able to really parse your application into discrete bits and really look bit by bit and figure out which platform makes the most sense is really powerful. And that pattern has been repeated time and time again for a large chunk of our customer base. So to answer your question though, there are several different compliance guidelines and controls that our customers bring to us, but the lion's share of them outside of FedRAMP and those kinds of things can meet through these architectures. So
yeah, and
our customers achieve.
I think the big common thread there is single tenancy, right?
Yeah.
And that's usually the thing. So tell us a little bit, Chris, about how we can help our customers with single tenancy.
Yeah, one of the things with single tenancy that we look at, as Doug described, is ensuring that customer has what they need behind the firewall to get the bandwidth that they need with the traffic they're running, whether it be between the cloud, tied into that database, or even if they have another application that they'd like to parse off and set off in a dedicated world. That single tenancy is going to allow them to give them compliant needs that they know they're going to have to meet. So we can actually establish that through our infrastructure and the way that we set that up, depending on the workloads they're trying to support. Because again, I think the key is understanding what their specific scenarios are, because not all customers are equal. Not all customers are created equal, and they have different needs.
Right.
So how do we make sure that we can manage that through single tenancy for each of those customers and set up a network architecture that's going to meet their unique needs?
Well, and I think that's the key there, is that we're looking at what are your needs. We're not just giving you a one-size-fits-all solution where it's, I don't know, I guess that is kind of a paradox. So if you think about it, because we don't have the granular control over a dedicated server. You can't rapidly deploy any server, right? So we're looking at some of the most common ones. But if you need something that's a little bit more customized, we can obviously do that on an individual basis. But that expertise that we've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing this for 16 years now,
Yeah.
we really know how to get you that right configuration, that right architecture for your needs. So.
And that's one of the things that we've done with rapid deployment as well, is we haven't just said, hey, here's your one server option, we'll hope you can fit into it. No, we've looked at a number of different use cases and workloads, working with Doug, working with others within, listening to customers and understanding what I want for a DB versus an application versus a webhead type server, and what scenarios are going to fit that hybrid model. So it isn't a one size fits all. That's why we have a number of different configurations that we can rapidly deploy in order to meet those customer needs and bring them up quickly.
That's a great point.
It's one thing to note too on the topic of compliance and security. One of the benefits is not just the single tenancy of the server that's being connected, bridged to the cloud networking universe via the firewall, but it's also the fact that the firewall, the device that is enforcing access control policy, is single tenant, right? And so that is a key factor when looking at customers with specific needs around compliance or security in general, that helps us achieve those needs. If it were a multi-tenant firewall solution, it wouldn't be nearly as effective or accommodate nearly as many use cases. So.
Absolutely. Well, so we're not just talking about deploying dedicated servers. We're talking about all of these servers deployed behind a firewall, right?
That's correct.
So we can rapid deploy both of those, because just deploying a server isn't going to help you at all. We need to have that firewall to go along with it. Let's talk about some of the, how many different types of configurations do we have?
Today, rapid deployment currently has 11 different configurations, depending on the technology need, both at the chassis level, proc, RAM. Depending on your needs, we've got 11 different configurations that start at the very low end for a small application workload, all the way to the very high end, where we can actually support a number of complex scenarios depending on what you're trying to run. So everything from 12 gig up to 128 gig of RAM, looking at single or dual proc scenarios, and then hard drive capacity. We range anywhere from 146 gig, 5x1 46 gig hard drives, all the way up to 5x6 gig 15K SAS hard drives. So, and then obviously that we can expand over time as the customer's growing. So that's the beauty also too. Here's what we have standard out of the gate, but we're going to grow with you just as you're growing.
Well, and that's the thing is, I mean, you might need something right now, and we can get that set up for you. But then as you continue to grow, that's when we start to look at those very specific customized servers and all of the gear that goes with it, right? I mean, load balancers and storage options and everything, I mean, you can grow into that. So plenty of options there. I'm really glad to see that. All right, let's go ahead and just say hi to everybody that's watching live on Facebook and Periscope and YouTube. Thanks for joining us again. I know I've got a bunch of questions about deploying dedicated gear, and especially in this rapid way that we can. But if anybody else has questions, we'd love to answer them too. So, on this show in particular, we talk a lot about cloud and a lot about the ways that we can get people into any number of different configurations. But dedicated kind of is one of those things we don't have enough time to talk about on this show. So I'm really glad that we've got some experts here. So let's ask them some questions here. So going back to, so if you're watching live, ask us some questions. We'd love to hear it. Just drop a comment wherever you're watching. We'll get that and answer that for you. Let's talk again about some of the different ways that that the dedicated servers meet those different compliance things, specifically PCI. I mean, we're talking we need to have single tenancy. So having that server that is not a cloud server, it's not a shared server, we meet it that way. And then again, that firewall also adds in some additional segregation of networking in there. So that crosses off those items on that PCI auditing checklist. Now, not everybody is going to want to have just a dedicated only environment, right? They might need to spin up some additional web heads to account for a large, a sale or something like that. Black Friday, for example, being the one of them. That's when we really want to start talking about that rack connected environment where we're connecting the dedicated servers to cloud servers, right? So, are the rapid deployment firewalls compatible with a Rack Connect environment where you can branch out into the cloud and burst out that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the joy of rapid deployment. Recently, we've launched that capability using our Rack Connect 3 technology to marry up to those cloud environments and tie in that firewall into those cloud environments, whether it's just a single firewall that the customer's saying, I want to restrict this this access via a single firewall, or we could actually tie that in with the firewall and tie a dedicated VLAN with the database server, or even possibly another segment, a dedicated segment that will allow them to, hey, I want to have these specific load or application running over here,
right,
but I want to be able to burst in the cloud for exact scenarios like you talked about. We can do that today with rapid deployment servers via Rack Connect to the cloud. Again, it's just what is that customer needing and how quickly are they needing it? Do they need it in minutes? Do they want it in hours? We can do both. Rapid deployment gives us the flexibility to do the dedicated side in hours, where the cloud gives us the bursting capability.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a big e-commerce practice here, right? So we have got a group that focuses not just on the infrastructure, but the actual e-commerce applications that things like Magento and Hybris and all these sorts of different common e-commerce apps, and they are big consumers of hybrid solutions. And the reason for this is there's, if you look at a typical e-commerce application deployment of Magento, and sorry, e-com guys, if I butcher this, you come get on Twitter and correct me. But there's elements of an e-commerce application like the catalog and that customers are browsing through and looking at your property online. And a lot of the actual systems that power that piece of the app are very suited for cloud. And it's got those dynamic properties. A lot of e-commerce is seasonal, right? But you have this challenge, which is that, okay, let's say you hit, the holiday season. You can scale the public cloud infrastructure very easily, but if all of your payment and transaction processing is happening in the dedicated physical world through Rack Connect on single tenant infrastructure, and your database now is seeing read performance or read requests jump up 5x, 6x, right? Well, I mean, what you don't want to have happen is to have it to take days and weeks to add more servers, right? It doesn't matter if you can scale up the web tier if the underlying data tier can't serve this request. And Rapid Deploy is a tool we have to meet seasonal traffic patterns or rapid requests for additional capacity, not necessarily in minutes, but fast enough, right? This takes the planning process, down from like months ahead down to like days ahead.
Right.
And it really has allowed us to it allows our customers to do things that they couldn't do, in years past. So it's a good tool that we have in our pocket for scalability issues where you still have data residing on the physical world.
And also the beauty of that too, Doug, is that with rapid deployment, I can also use install base. I can add an install base additional server or add to that database for storage capacity needs via some hard drive upgrades. Those are capable with rapid deployment as well. If I want to add another server or add some storage capacity, that is available via rapid deployment as well in case hey, well, you know what? We've got more business than we thought. We need to add even more.
Great.
We'll have another. We'll
That's a great problem to have.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have, but we're here to support those needs as well.
Well, good. Well, and that's kind of bringing us to that considerations that you can gain when you're using a rapid deployment. Or when you're using dedicated hardware, right? So normally we're talking about the cloud, but let's talk a little bit about those performance aspects. So we talked a little bit about the PCI, the different compliances. So the other reason that people want to do that is for performance. And Doug, you started to mention that as well. But I mean, we're talking about a significant increase. I think from where I sit in the cloud world, I see a lot of people who would run a cloudy environment, but they would put that database server, right? That's the one that takes all those reads and writes and takes all of the that information gathering. The thing is queried just over and over and over again with a lot of apps, especially in that e-commerce world, right? How many widgets do we have left? And so let's talk about how we can get performance improvements and what some of those performance improvements look like.
So when I think about that, there are things we need to look at from the overall architectural of what's required over that network and that bandwidth that we're actually going to need to put through that firewall. A lot of times we want to scale only to what I think I need or what my budget allows, but then when we actually have these really large, Black Friday is better than what we thought, now I'm confining my bandwidth. All right, so really got to look at what those firewall needs, and I'm building for what my peaks are rather than just for what my norm is. And how do I scale that in that dedicated gear? So one of the things with rapid deployment is we understand that those scenarios vary depending on who those customers are and depending on their types of businesses they're running. So we want to make sure and provide for as much bandwidth as possible. So we have a variety of firewall options for those customers depending on how many cloud apps are you going to be trying to run, and what is that database going to be required, and what does those peak loads look like during your up times or at your end of month or end of quarter or during Black Fridays. Let's make sure you get the right firewall with the right bandwidth so that we can ensure that you can write to that database as often as possible, read from it, and impact to your customers because we know you're sensitive to it. So one, let's make sure we have the right bandwidth at that firewall. But then also, too, when we're looking at networking and making sure that we can route that traffic to where we need it to go, let's make sure that we've got the right performance on that processor or the right performance in that actual chassis or that server to support that need. So that's also why we have the different configuration options, because when I've got that dedicated server, it's dedicated to doing that job you're telling it to do. So that's a whole lot more horsepower that you might need for that DB to ensure that your customers have their appropriate experience with your company.
Well, those are all great questions that that we get to dig into, right? That's the thing is we're not just out there trying to like we said this before, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? And so we're always out there looking at that. That's why we have experts. That's why we don't just say, hey, here's a server, go ahead and throw that online. So really trying to figure out what it is. And these are those great questions that I would never think to ask, but the people who are live in this world are able to go in and get that, and really take a look at that. I think we'll jump in and talk about that a little bit more. Just wanted to say hi to James and Bill who are watching on Facebook. Hey guys, thanks for joining in. Sorry if it's a little bit difficult to concentrate with all the stickers. We got a whole bunch of stickers on here, of different stickers for the all of the different projects that we work on here at Rackspace, and it's great. Bill, if you want one for your laptop as well, I can send you a couple of them. Hit me up afterwards. And James, hey, how's it going? As well, good to see you guys on there. So we're talking about dedicated hardware and getting them deployed quickly, right? So not just in that days or weeks that it might take to get a custom server up and online. We're talking about the ways that we're doing that. My name's Alan Bush, and I'm a technical community manager here at Rackspace, the #1 managed cloud company. I'm here with Doug Denny and Chris. I'm not even going to say it because I know I always do it. Chris Wiesenhutter. That's it. Yeah, I knew it. I knew it every time. Every time. You should have seen it when I was here with Bob Smythe and Smith, apparently. I don't know. But I'll get them all wrong. But no, it's great to have you guys on here because this is something that you have spent a lot of time working with and are very acquainted with. And I'm grateful to have you guys to help us explain this. One thing that I was kind of curious about is, can you go through some of the process and what it would actually look like? So if I'm a customer and I say, I'm already working with Rackspace, I've got an application that's architected, I'm a good office hours listener, and I make sure that I have a cloud load balancer and a couple of different web servers and a separate database server. But now, I know that Black Friday's coming up and I want to get up and running with a dedicated hardware database. I really see my business taking off, and I need to do that. So tell me kind of the process that we would go through. You call up and talk to an account manager, and they would get you over to somebody they can talk about it. But what would that look like for that customer?
So one of the things that with rapid deployment today, we're specifically have to make sure that that customer can fit that rapid deployment scenario, right? Because again, it's not a one size fits all. I want to ensure that that customer is already in that Rackspace scenario, or they're a rapid deployment customer. Because today, rapid deployment, we do have some constraints around where we can go add into existing infrastructures. But for a customer coming in brand new, or a customer saying, hey, I want to start with Rackspace, rapid deployment's a great option to start. And then it gives them that scalability so that they can begin to add to that infrastructure. It also gives them the ability then to say, hey, I'd really actually like to go have some bursting capabilities. Can you connect me to cloud? Yeah, we can through Rack Connect 3. We could even do that from the very beginning with that customer. Now, once that customer has a rapid deployment footprint, we can then start adding all different kinds of options for them, whether it be adding more storage capacity within those servers, adding more servers, adding other networks that they might possibly have into the cloud via Rack Connect. Again, it depends on that customer and how they came into Rackspace for rapid deployment. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all, because many of those customers have already set up their infrastructure in their environment, and we may or may not be able to rapidly deploy into it today, but we can work around some of those scenarios if they want to set up a net new environment to handle some of that workload. We can look at those different scenarios.
That's a great point. It doesn't always have to be adding on to another existing work, or to a existing workload. We can greenfield some projects. So that's one of the. It's funny because that's one of the things we recommend for people who are in that hosting their own infrastructure, right? So they've got their own data center, their own server room, and we say, hey, well, don't just take all your servers out today and set up or shop at Rackspace. Let's move that one new project over. Right. So move it over to the cloud, and now we're saying, okay, well, move that new project over to dedicated. So yeah, you never know. It's all cyclical. Are there any pain points, any kind of gotcha things that we need to watch out for whenever you're getting set up?
It's a good call, because for rapid deployment, we're growing as our customer needs are growing. Today, we can't support every scenario with rapid deployment servers, so we have our customizable options I encourage you to contact your account manager to understand which scenarios fit rapid deployment, which don't.
Yeah.
But today, when I look at customers requiring HA or high availability, those are a little bit more complex scenarios, so they're not easy to rapid deploy. So we're not there with the portfolio just yet from that perspective. So high availability, or those customers that they're tying to external storage, dedicated external storage, they don't fit a rapid deployment footprint. It doesn't mean Rackspace can't support you. It's just we can't do it via rapid deployment. So those are scenarios they're not good fits for rapid deployment today, or HA, and those requiring dedicated external storage.
Yeah, I mean, I know that for our like managed virtualization and private cloud solutions, rapid deploy is for now not a suitable bare metal target for that. But generally, for bare metal use cases, it's the right way to go, right? As long as where you don't need storage, you don't need additional hypervisor or cloud software layered on top. If you just need an operating system, right, and compute, it is perfect.
And it's great for those DBs as well. So
Absolutely.
those DB loads. So those are great use cases, and we'll grow as we're getting more and more customers asking for those things from us. But that today is where our sweet spot for rapid deployment is, and we'll expand those capabilities over time.
There you go. That's good to see. Getting a lot of good comments over on Facebook and other places. James is mentioning that he likes to customize his servers with sweet flames painted on the sides. Yeah, I think that we customize a lot of our servers that way too. I mean, you'll never see them, so we can say that we do. But no, I don't know that we've ever tried that one. Yeah, but it's there. And hey, Lyndon, watching from the future. That's crazy. Tell me how tomorrow's going out there in Australia. So thanks for watching us from all around the world. Good to see you all there. If you're just joining us, we're watching. You are watching. I'm talking.
We're kind of watching.
We're kind of watching it too. Yeah, we got it up here just to make sure that we look okay, and I think we do. But this is Rackspace, the #1 managed cloud company. I'm Alan. I'm here with Doug and Chris, and we're talking about dedicated hardware and how we can deploy that in a very rapid fashion, which is, I think, a really great way that we're able to show off. I think our technology, right? So it's not just this, customizable dedicated servers that we have. It's not just these cloud servers, but it's also this ability to kind of blend those two worlds together. And we've been talking about the ways that they're able to work together, and then the ways that you're able to kind of build up a brand new dedicated only environment. So answering a lot of good questions there. And speaking of which, if you have more questions, we'd love to hear them. So send them our way wherever you're watching from. So what are some of the customer use cases besides? I mean, we've talked a lot about e-commerce, right? So that's we see a lot of that. We have a lot of customers that are there. Are there any other customer scenarios where we see a lot of it?
Well, I know we're talking a lot about databases, but I want to bring up one point, which is that there's a couple of reasons why you would want a database to run on single tenant hardware. One might be due to the nature of the sensitivity of the data residing in that database.
Right.
Another might be just the raw performance benefits of bare metal, not shared with anybody else. But there's another one which is really big in the database world, which is licensing costs. Right, so licensing schemes for SQL in public cloud are generally limited. You don't have as many options. You can't always get the enterprise version, and part of the reason for that too is that you're bound to the service provider licensing agreement for that particular cloud, which isn't always as flexible as the SPLA or dedicated infrastructure. And so there are inflection points in different scenarios based on licensing editions, for example, Microsoft SQL Server, right, where you can actually get more performance per dollar if that's your metric, which it is for a lot of people.
It is, yeah.
On dedicated hardware. And if we could map it out on a graph, right, there's points where that's not true, there's points where it is certainly true. But things like core density and the fact that you have access to all of those cores, they're yours only, that the licensing starts to work in your favor in a lot of scenarios for SQL. And like, let's not even talk about Oracle. They're our partners, but man, usually 9 times, well, here, if you're running Oracle or Rackspace, you're running that on physical hardware, right? So if you have applications that benefit from Oracle, including a lot of Oracle e-commerce apps, really single tenant's the only way to go. So to be able to get that rapidly is critical for a lot of our customers that have varying traffic patterns.
Doug, that's also one of the reasons why you see the number of options we have with rapid deployment. We have everything from quad-core offerings to hex-core to dual-hex to octa-core offerings to dual octa-core, depending on that workload and depending on that licensing.
Yeah.
That's what many of our customers were telling us. We need some options, whether it's database options or for just raw compute power and so forth. That's why we have the number of options we have. So we have some flexibility even within rapid deployment in order to meet some of those needs.
If your application depends on features only available in SQL Server Enterprise, you're really concerned about cores. Like, I mean, that is not cheap software, right? And so having that sort of diversity of choice still in the rapid deploy form factor is really helpful. And again, the cost per performance, right, for performance is significantly better on dedicated hardware for pretty much any scenario involving SQL Server Enterprise, right? So that's a common one that we see. And where we see customers that start with SQL running in the cloud, their needs for SQL grow to where they're going to bump up into the higher editions of SQL, and that's a good point in time to really evaluate, like, okay, would I actually save money if I refocus this on dedicated infrastructure? So
well, now you got me thinking. That's good. I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more, because that's something that you usually don't consider, right? You know, but you can save money by running that on dedicated structure. So that's great. That's great. Yeah. All right. I get something to think about now.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm also thinking about there's applications that also get licensed by the core too. Not as many of them in our world, but some of the stuff that we do in the digital world, like content management and applications and e-com applications, look at cores, right? And you need to make a decision. You know, how much of my load is steady state and how much of my load is variable. And right, you can definitely save money by taking the steady state workload, retargeting it for dedicated infrastructure, but then again, when you enter those seasonal bursts, you know, you add the capacity in the cloud. And but rapid deploy just gives us that much more flexibility, right, on both sides of the equation.
Well, and this is interesting. Bill asked a question on Facebook, and I think it's a great kind of a great segue into this. So Bill says that he managed a couple of VPS instances with another company. He scaled up and then found out later on that he couldn't scale back down. So let's talk about how that works with Rackspace. So we have a whole bunch of different types of cloud servers, and our thoughts on this are that we want to scale horizontally as much as possible. So we don't want to scale vertically, right? So scaling up and down the amount of RAM, CPU, different resources we have there. Sure. We really want to add additional resources alongside that horizontally. So what we would recommend is find ways. Some applications work that way and some don't, right? And so if you don't, you might need to look at some over provisioning, something like that. But if you are able to, we really recommend that horizontal scaling. So instead of adding more RAM and more CPU to a single box, what we would say is let's add additional boxes alongside of that to distribute out that load. Now, I don't know specifically about our dedicated gear and what that would look like. Chris, can you talk to that a little bit?
Again, it depends on the scenarios like you're talking about. Just as you said, we have the capability of adding another processor, for some of the rapid deployment gear. We also could add more storage capacity. We could add more RAM, depending on if that's what that customer to work their specific scenario. We also have the capability of adding another server, to your point, and sharing that workload across multiple server sets, depending on that workload. So there is capability to do either, pending the scenario and what's works best for that customer. Again, most of my customers I talk to, I don't want them to talk so much about their budget. I know that's a critical need, but I want to make sure that they're understanding, well, what is that critical workload look like for you, right? And where's that opportunity you don't want to miss? Because I want to have you prepared for that, whether it's through the cloud so that we have that capability ready and available for you, rather than waiting until the last minute and then going, darn, I wish I would have. I want to keep customers away from those type of scenarios. I want to understand where those high points are for them, so that they don't miss the opportunity to make more money, which is what we're all here for.
Right.
That's absolutely one of the things that we don't want to see, right? And we call that's one of the things that frankly, the team that I started here at Rackspace, the cloud launch team, that's one of the reasons why we started, is we would have customers that would have this giant event, and it was a kind of a make or break event, and frankly, we didn't serve them very well. We didn't get them that information that they needed to start off with, and so we said, let's make sure that we don't do that anymore. Let's get them that proactive information that they need, help them get set up in the right place so that they can scale out in an appropriate way, and we don't want to see that success failure, right? So. So yes, we really want to do everything we can to make sure that they are that they're put out there, or that we have that information so they don't fail. And I mean, those are the type of questions that we want to ask you. We don't just want to, again, give you a one-size-fits-all solution. We want to talk to you. We want to be able to do that. Chris, what are some of the questions that you want to ask a customer, like what are some of the questions you have to ask every customer to make sure that you get into that proper fit?
So when I'm talking to a customer, obviously I want to understand what application workloads are they running, where do they see their peaks and their valleys, what are their high points, and where are they seeing, where are their growth patterns? Do they typically see growth at what times of the seasons? Where's the seasonal instances in some types of business are going to change depending on what business they're running? So I want to make sure that I'm clear in understanding where they deem their peaks and valleys are. I'd love having the opportunity, if I had the chance, to talk to their IT teams or some IT rep just to understand is, okay, when are you most busy? when do you have the most hair on fire type scenarios? Because it's those times when I'd love to understand, what does your load look like on the servers, on those application servers? What does your load look like on your DBs? What does your load look like on your network? What is your bandwidth constraints? Where are they? Between what systems? Those are the things that I want to make sure that I'm clear on to help establish and build the right scenario for them, so that way they don't have the same constraints here at Rackspace. And in addition to that, I also want to make sure that they have the capability to say, okay, let's say there's 110, 120% of that. How would we want to handle that? What is the most optimal scenario to help you scale to that 10, 20, 30% growth that you weren't anticipating? Because that's what we want for you. So ensuring that they have that capability, as you said, to easily scale via either adding another server or giving them bursting capability via the cloud, depending on what scenarios they're running. So those are the kind of things that I want to know, so that way I can help them in their business, because I want them to feel that Rackspace is an extension of that business, and we're in it for them. We're not just in it for ourselves. We're in it for those customers, because they're the ones that keep us doing what we do.
And that's that's the stark reality of it, is we are a business, and we need other businesses to be successful for us to be successful. So we're going to do what we can, and sometimes we do end up suggesting a solution that costs more money than you're paying right now, than you are maybe even looking to pay. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, we want you to succeed. We want you to win, and we're going to do we're going to give you that advice that we need to get you to do that. So. Bill, great question. You got us on a nice little discussion there. Got a couple more questions coming in. Chris, many people have tried. No one has been successful. And then Lyndon has a great question, right? So Lyndon is doing some great thinking out there in Australia, early hours of the morning. So Lyndon's wanting to know, going back to those PCI compliance or other types of compliance, which Rackspace products should be avoided? Are the OpenStack cloud services sufficient, or should all services be run on dedicated hardware? So yeah, I don't know that I would say avoid them, but I would say that there are some that are going to be that are not going to get you that PCI, past that PCI audit. Like, the main thing is data at rest, right? Is one of the main things that we're looking at.
So this is such a challenge, and we, before, when I worked in the sales engineering side of the house, a big part of the pre-sales dialogue would stem from questions like this, right? And I'm not trying to dodge the question, but the reality is, a lot of it is situational, and there's situations where compensating controls can be put in place that might meet the shortcomings of an infrastructure design, and there's a sort of marriage between the provider and the consumer of infrastructure when it comes to the different responsibilities needed to ultimately pass an audit, right? Right. And so, to your point, there are platforms that we offer that have less inherent tool sets for achieving that. But that said, it is entirely possible to pass an audit that has some pieces of the workload living in the public cloud here, right? But we would really need to unpack that with our pre-sales and post-sales engineering teams to customize a solution that helps you meet the goals. And we look at additional compensating controls you might have in your software or in the processes that you operate in your business, right? And do put the equation together to figure out how we reach that. But yeah, you're going to have less hoops to jump through if you're putting payment processing specifically on dedicated infrastructure, or offloading that all together to a whole other entity, right?
Right. I mean, that's the other thing, is that you might just offload all of that. You might also just offload all of that to a third-party partner. You know,
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of different ones that will do that for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, like anything that you store, that's going to happen usually at that data tier, right? That database tier, and so that's when you can put that on. When you put that on that dedicated hardware, you're going to be on a single tenant, and then that's going to get you closer to that a little bit about that part of your audit, right? I think the other the other thing to look at is when you have the web tier, that's just transferring data back and forth, right? The data doesn't live there on that. It's just used to transmit the data to your browser or however it's connecting. So that's when we see a hybrid architecture, it's usually one or more servers just for a dedicated database. They're behind a firewall, so limited people, limited applications can access it. And then usually those web servers are all behind or all outside of that firewall, and those will usually be on that public cloud because they can scale up and scale down, right?
Right.
Yeah. Lyndon, I'd be curious, are you an existing customer? Or are you looking at joining up with Rackspace? If you can drop us a comment, or if you've gone back to bed, I understand. But that would be interesting. So, and if you are an existing customer and have some of these questions, we'd love to hear from you. We would love to get in front of this, as opposed to getting a call later that you did not pass that PCI audit. So we'd love to hear you after
Absolutely.
that. Really appreciate these questions. These are some great questions and getting us thinking on a lot of things here. And we got a couple more minutes, so if you have some more questions, go ahead and drop us here. What other, are we missing anything else in this discussion? You look like you had a little something you wanted to add there, Chris.
Yeah, there's other scenarios too that we can support. So we've talked about having a dedicated. We've had a database utilizing those scenarios. We also too can stand up your cloud with just a firewall. If we want to just make that restrict access to meet some compliance needs or even some security needs that you may have within your own organizations or inside your own companies. Rapid deployment, we can stand up firewalls just to put your cloud behind a dedicated firewall as well. It doesn't necessarily have to have a server behind it. We could do that as well. That's something we can do with our.
I've seen people do that to set up like a site-to-site VPN.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those scenarios we also support in rapid deployment.
Yeah, one of the ones I've seen for a while is where, fairly frequently is set up that rapid deployment firewall, set up a Microsoft server to do an Active Directory, and then that way you have multiple different remote offices, and you can have just one single point, and you don't have to have anybody locally, running that server out of a closet.
I've got a few that I've seen in the past. So larger enterprises that want to do dev test in a cloud, but they don't want actual open world network access to those instances. They only want their folks working in the office to be able to connect over VPN, right? So sort of like a logical cloud extension that isn't open to the universe, right? And so this use case would allow those developers to connect via VPN or just have a persistent site-to-site VPN to their location, and then continue to use cloud for dev and tests as they would anywhere else, but through a secure, controlled network. But the additional benefits you get from that are, because I know you can technically do that with like a Viata vRouter, right? But having a dedicated appliance, so having more horsepower and muscle dedicated to the VPN connectivity, and plus having the management, right, of that dedicated appliance, can help accommodate larger use cases. Another one we didn't have rapid deploy at the time, unfortunately, for this, but a large financial organization did a lot of like number crunching on bare metal in their data center. And they wanted to get out of, they're looking at like refreshing their hardware, and they're looking to service providers to see if they could rapidly spin up machines on which to do number crunching. But OnMetal, like, which would be great for this, doesn't have Windows OS support yet. Is that still true?
I think it's still true. That version 2 might have it as right now, right?
So
we'll double check on that real quick and get back to you.
I'm sorry to create a problem.
Tyler, can you take a look at that? Or producer Tyler can do that.
If it has Windows, it's awesome. But again, that would have been a use case that this could have helped with, right? Where you could rapidly spin up. Again, not within minutes, but they just needed it within like a week, right? Yeah. Which is faster than they could do in their own data center. It would have taken months to procure all this hardware. So.
Well, and I think that you mentioned that's a great mention there of OnMetal, right? Which is our cloud deployed bare metal servers, right? So no hypervisor there, but they're still deployed through our cloud APIs, right? So what are some of the differences there between the OnMetal product and the dedicated servers?
So with dedicated gear, that's the world that I live in. We have a little bit more OS options and opportunities you have that you can get on those rapid deployed servers, depending on Windows, Linux, even some one-offs today at Rackspace that we support. We can do that via automation, so you have a little bit more flexibility there. You also have a little bit more flexibility on scaling. Scaling is going to be a little different, like we talked about before. With OnMetal, we're going a little bit more horizontal, but with Rapid Deploy, we can do things a little bit differently around the firewall, as well as around the configurations that we're going to be able to support as that customer needs to, depending on what the needs of those application workloads are. So OnMetal is a great solution in some scenarios, but dedicated, we also I'd still recommend dedicated in some of those compliant security needs that you've got.
Right.
I'd be looking primarily for those dedicated gear versus the OnMetal that we got today.
The hardware is a little different too, though, right?
That's correct.
I guess tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so hardware from a dedicated gear perspective, we support our Dell R710, our Dell R720s, and our HP DL380s. So again, we have some different configuration flavors depending on what those needs are for those customers, as well as where their budgets are today. So from those perspective, we have some flexibility that OnMetal may not have.
Yeah, I'd say that OnMetal too. When you look at the hardware choices, OnMetal is designed for workloads that operate best on bare metal, but still aren't necessarily designed to be persistent, like for months and weeks, right? Whereas the hardware choices that have been selected for Rapid Deploy are still more traditional enterprise gear, things with like dual power supplies and all this stuff that are like folks like HP and Dell bake in, because they're designed for typical enterprise use cases and software that runs in a traditional data center. So running things like Microsoft SQL that expect the hardware to always be there, and for years and years at a time, generally they're designed for servers like the Dell, right, or the HP. So just subtle difference, but designed for different problems.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, when we talk dedicated, we mean dedicated not just to you as the single tenant, but also like dedicated for the long run. And I think that OnMetal is more for that transient workload that might come up. We see a lot of people that are crunching data, right, or something like that, bulk processing video images, things like that. They need that raw horsepower, so they'll spin up on a nightly basis or a weekly basis or however much they need it, spin up that OnMetal server, run that data through it, and then shut it down as soon as that's done, which is a very cash flow sensitive way to do things, right?
Yeah.
But if you have that constant persistent need, that's what we're looking at for that dedicated server.
When Rapid Deploy is designed to like come up rapidly, in preparation for a season, it's not designed to come up to grow to 1,000 and shrink to 0 in a day, right? That's a different problem set that Rapid Deploy is not looking to solve, that OnMetal is, right? Yeah. So.
Okay, so to answer that question, Tyler, our producer, looked it up. It looks like OnMetal V2 will support Windows soon. Right, so it's almost there, right? Okay. So we're working on rolling that out,
which will be awesome.
Which will be awesome. I think the other big benefit of Rapid Deploy, or at least of using dedicated gear, is that we can use it in most of our data centers, right? So is it rolled out in all of our data centers?
It's not in all of our data centers just yet, but we do have it here in the U.S.
Okay.
And we also do have it in an international community, so we have availability at a global level for rapid deployment gear.
Great,
cool.
Great. There you go. There you go. So yeah, so we've got that. Let's see. Okay, Lyndon also mentioned that he is a customer. Great. Love hearing from our customers. And then had another question real quick, and we'll wrap up with this one, just to kind of give you the idea of how you deal with public cloud handling SSL traffic that contains customer sensitive information, right? So that is the purpose of SSL. It creates that secure layer that the information would be potentially even encrypted on the dedicated server that we would have. It would go through the firewall, continue to be encrypted through the web servers, and then as it's delivered across the public internet, continues to be encrypted and then is decrypted at the browser by the customer, right? The browser, the web app, however your mobile phone app, however you're receiving that, it will is only then decrypted at that end destination. So it's there. It's not. It's only going to show up unencrypted once it gets to the customer, and then when they send their sensitive information back, again, it's encrypted at the browser, sent encrypted back through the web heads, continues to it would then become decrypted there as it goes to the actually it goes straight to the database depending on how it's being put in. So that's an application issue as well. So all right. Let's see. All right. Shout out to Hansu. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Let's see. Tyler's just looking up the information on OnMetal and Windows servers there, but I think we got our answer there. Thanks for watching, though. Really appreciate you all that you do here, not just watching the show. So great to hear that. I guess we'll go ahead and kind of get it wrapped up here. This was a lot of information, a lot of really good information that we've learned here. I know I learned a lot, and I've got a couple of interesting things that I can think about going forward on ways that we can continue to help our customers out there. Thanks to everybody that watched and submitted some questions. It was great to see all those questions, and I think we answered a lot of questions for people. Real quick, I just want to say that Doug's show is called Deep Dives, and it happens just about every Wednesday.
Yeah, just about every Wednesday. You can go to rackspace.com/deep dive, and you will see the schedule of events. You can watch past shows, and we actually have downloadable assets that support the conversation we had in every show. So if you want to go browse some reference architectures, reports, please do, and send us a note.
It's a really well-named show because you really like to dive in deep on like one subject, right?
Yeah,
so it's like, what was it this week? It was actually...
let's see. Yesterday we
Office 365.
Office 365. Yeah, we had some folks come on board and talk about Office 365, and it's not always a technical deep dive. Sometimes it's a deep dive into like nerdy things like economics of solutions, or it's always a deep dive, but say it's like 50% technical, 50% other topics, but we try to go as deep as we can. Yeah,
absolutely. And then you usually have that extra, hey, there's an architecture. This is how you can set up an Office 365 environment to work across all these different areas. And then you'll have a architecture diagram that you can download.
That's right.
Get more information. So that's it's oftentimes a lot more specific than we are on this show here. But Chris, thank you for joining us as well and shedding a little light.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Doug was absolutely right in recommending you, so really glad to have you on. Speaking of this show, we do this show every Thursday or thereabouts at 1 o'clock Central Time. We also have a audio-only podcast version that we put out once this is done. So if you prefer to listen to these type of conversations, if you prefer to listen in your car, at the gym, wherever you want to, you can go to ohpodcast.com and download them there, subscribe to the podcast, and get it every week that way. So on that note, I think I'll go ahead and say thank you again, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate hearing from you, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.